He's amassed a staggering 2 million followers, and he's teaching young people to take control of their finances. From secondary school to post-university, what is it about our guest today, Noah Briley, that has captured the attention of this generation? And does it mean we need to rethink the curriculum when it comes to teaching our students on financial management?
Welcome to Safeguarding Redefined, a podcast by Cornerstone Safeguarding. We'll be exploring a range of topics from child protection to adult safeguarding and everything in between. Please note some of the topics we'll be discussing may be sensitive in nature and may trigger strong emotions.
Noah, thank you so much for joining us today. What was your motivation to focus on this specific topic, and how have you managed to capture the attention of so many young people?
Thank you so much for inviting me on. It's a pleasure to be here. So, what I do is I teach people on TikTok, on Instagram, on short form platforms, things that I wish school would have taught me. So mainly that does come down to things like money and career and how to get ahead in life, because I believe there were just vital things that school missed out along the way. So really my social media, I started it when I was back in year 10, and I just used it as a way to document the things that I was learning that school wasn't teaching me. So how to get ahead with your money, how to start a side hustle, all of these things. And it grew over time, and it's worked really well. Lots of brands have got on board. And for me, this is a really great thing because I think firstly, it's so important that young people actually start learning about financial education, because it's something that honestly, it's a problem. So we need people who actually know how to manage money and how to actually do the right steps to teach younger people. So I was really trying to just get out there, and I'm not an expert by any means. I just sort of learn things, bring other people in, and share what I learn and document my journey of, okay, here's how I am investing my money. Here's how I'm saving my money. And I think it's really important that we start getting this information into schools, into the curriculum, so other young people know the basics, because there's so many risks to not knowing and understanding how to manage your money, which we'll go into later, particularly on the safeguarding side. Kids can get into a lot of financial trouble if they don't understand the basics, and it's not hard to teach the basics.
There's clearly a need there, considering how many followers that you've managed to amass over the last few years, and it's very much the younger generation who are attracted to your videos. So obviously you've got a lot of people who are older, but it does seem to be the younger generation. So it's a bit of a reflective point for those of us who have worked in education for a long time. We've provided PSHE classes and we've tried our best with teaching as much as we possibly can on these topics. But clearly, from what you're saying, there is a need to kind of pursue it a little bit more, going in a bit more in depth into the actual topic. So I'm interested to find out a little bit more. So what do you think are the risks for young people today when it comes to money management?
Oh, there are a lot of risks. Firstly, if you turn 18 or start going to uni, there is a risk that actually debt can start creeping up in your life, and it can become quite attractive to go on these buy now, pay later schemes, which I know a lot of young people are starting to buy into. Less so now, but some people do even get credit cards, things like that. But there are more sneaky ways that these credit companies and loan companies sneak into our everyday life, our everyday consuming. You can even buy Deliveroo now on buy now, pay later, which I find crazy. So you can buy a McDonald's meal and pay for it later, which is just bonkers. So there are a lot of risks when it comes to that side of your money. But also just not knowing how much basic costs should be and how to manage your money. Often so many young people will buy cars that they can't afford. If they move out of their house and they go to uni, they'll actually get themselves in a living situation that they cannot afford, and they find that their money's run out before the end of the month, and they live so paycheck to paycheck that they actually have to get into overdraft, have to get into debt, have to go back to mum and dad. And a lot of parents, and this is the thing, we don't have in the UK a saving culture like the Americans do, where generally when you're born, parents in the US will try to save as much as they can for their kids before they go to uni. In the UK, it just doesn't work the same, because we think the maintenance loans will cover everything. I know for a fact, all my mates say it doesn't. The cost of living is so high right now. So there are so many risks when it comes to debt, mismanaging your money, and that can lead to serious safeguarding issues. It can lead, I've seen it lead to young people getting involved in the wrong sort of ways to make money. Particularly, there's either online sort of prostitution that goes on, which I've seen. There's also illegal methods, such as there's this term now called clicking, which is essentially people who will join Snapchat groups, Telegram groups, and buy illegal methods to make money, such as buying fake debit card information, ordering items to pick up at places like Argos, Nike, Apple, picking up those items with basically using stolen credit cards. And this you might think this is like something only criminals do. I knew people in secondary school who were doing this. This is not uncommon. So there are a lot of illegal and slightly dodgy methods. There are methods where people, I've had mates who have been so desperate for money, they've started buying fake AirPods. They've gone to CEX and eBay and all these places and traded them in as if they were new. So there are a lot of risks these days for young people actually to get in trouble with the law, because this stuff is so accessible, and people online on social media, on TikTok, will post methods of this is how you can easily make £500 a month just reselling fake AirPods or clicking. It's the whole world that I think most teachers and people aren't actually aware of, which is partly as well why I like to teach these legit normal side hustles, because I think there's a whole dark road as well. There's also risk with money laundering and being a money mule. So sometimes young people will get approached by people and say, look, if we drop 50 grand into your bank account and you get £500 and just don't ask any questions, is that okay? They don't realize they're actually being used by drug gangs, criminal gangs to launder their money because they cannot use their own bank accounts. So there are all of these safeguarding risks that you think they don't happen. They're really common, really, really common. And, this is maybe more of the extreme examples, but it's getting common, and it's very possible that young people can fall into these traps and get in serious trouble, messed up with the wrong people, if they're not careful with how they're spending their money.
You raised some really good points there, and how easy it is for young people to be groomed. And I think our automatic response or thought process when we work in safeguarding or within education is to think straight away of grooming as being, right, they're in a gang. But actually, this can be done behind closed doors. And you raise actually a few more avenues or gateways into grooming behavior that young people are just probably not aware of. And older people, when I say older people, my age, I don't think I'm that old, but people of my generation that would approach this topic in that kind of way. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And there was another point you brought up as well that I've recently covered in a blog on safeguarding in the city, that where it's so expensive to go to university or live or work in the city, that some people are resorting to really harmful approaches to making money. And so you have highlighted some really good points of why it's so important to teach better money management and approaches to making money, and what things to avoid, most notably in younger years through their educational journey. So, I mean, it's pretty obvious from what you've said, but it's worth asking to see if there's any more behind this. But what inspired you to focus on educating the younger generation about this topic?
Sure. I think there was a disconnect I saw with when I asked my parents about money, when I asked my teachers about money. Often they really wouldn't know what to say to me, and they would say, "Oh, just don't worry about it. Don't think about it. Just progress on through your life." Yet I knew friends in the older years of my school who went to uni and ended up in really bad financial situations, completely broke. And I didn't want to end up like that. And I knew deep down, if I just get ahead now, if I think ahead now, I can get myself in a far better financial situation than my peers. And I'm glad I did that, and I documented that journey online. So essentially what inspired me to start creating content around this? Well, firstly, I had a natural interest in just getting ahead in life. I knew that school wasn't teaching enough. Secondly, I was consuming a lot of that content. So I was listening to podcasts and videos, and I wanted to summarize and teach that information that I was learning. But also I just found, like, I created one video and suddenly a bunch of my mates came to me and was like, "Oh, bro, that's so useful. That's so interesting." And I think it becomes addictive. The more you can help other people, the more you want to keep creating content.
No, I really appreciate that you're actually approaching this topic from a really positive standpoint as well, because some people can be on there go, you can make loads of money by this, but what you're really doing is you're just helping them to make money. Whereas what you're doing is you're encouraging other people to be able to look after themselves, safeguard themselves when it comes to financial management. I take my hat off to you for doing that. And I know a lot of people are going to benefit very positively from that. What are some common financial mistakes you see young people making today, and how can they avoid them?
Okay, so the first and the biggest financial mistake that I think a lot of young people are making are not checking that they might have some money sat in a child trust fund account. Now, a lot of people don't even know when I say child trust fund what it is, but essentially it's a tax-free savings account for children in the United Kingdom that was set up by the government to encourage them to save money and help with costs in the future. And if you were born between 2002 and 2011, so that was me, a lot of people that I know, you were probably given quite a substantial sum of money by the government. And depending on your family, how much your parents earned, the amount sat in this account could be anywhere from between £500 to £1,000. Some people have had way more than that. It all depended on how much your parents were earning, if your parents added anything while you were a child. And it's estimated that there's well over £1 billion sat in these accounts that's been forgotten about because the government essentially didn't do a good enough job at letting young people know, and specifically their parents, how to access these accounts and where this money is sat. So many young people are just going to go about their entire lives not knowing that there's an easy £1,000 or £2,000 just sat in these accounts waiting for them to redeem. So firstly, just go online, search up on the Gov UK website, the Child Trust Fund, and just see if there's any money sat in there for you. If you were born between 2002 and 2011 in the UK, so if you were born somewhere else like the Netherlands and then you came to the UK, you won't get it. But if you're born in the UK between 2002 and 2011, check it, because it's the easiest way I found for young people to claim money that they didn't know they had. So that would be my number one mistake that I would say young people are making, is not checking that they actually have this money. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
That's really interesting. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people are going to be going, right, I need to check this for my child or for themselves.
Yeah.
And I think obviously we would encourage in that process that yes, if you've got it, brilliant. We're not encouraging you to spend it. And I think that's what we probably point out here. And that's why I think the message that you're conveying to young people is so important, is you're saying to them, don't go out there and spend straight away. So what are 3 financial habits every young person should start building now to secure a stable financial future?
So you raised a good point there. Obviously, a lot of kids will get this child trust fund and spend it on whatever they want. Yeah, you can do that, but it's not very wise. So what you really need to start thinking about when we're talking about 3 financial habits is, number 1, every single time you get money, so that could be on your payday, or you might get your child trust fund, or you might get some money for Christmas, is you want to have an automatic routine. Because relying on your own self to remember to put some of that money away and not spend all of it, it's going to be too difficult. Most young people, if they see money sat in a bank account, they're naturally going to want to spend it. They'll go out and they'll think, oh, I've got enough money in my bank, I can afford that. So what you need to do is create a routine. Every single time that you get money, have a system. So you want to send a certain amount of it to your savings. You want to put a certain amount of it away maybe for an emergency fund, but also put a certain amount of it away for what you need. And obviously this would be different for every single person. And that leads me on to my second point, which would be, you want to start building from as early as you can an emergency fund. Now, while you're a student, you don't have to have the biggest emergency fund. If you're actually living and you've got a car and you've got rents and a mortgage and all of that, then it would be wise to have an emergency fund of maybe 3 to 6 months. That's what most experts recommend. Just in case the worst happens, you've got some money there. But even as a young person, it's important to just have a nice little bit of money just sat in an account, earning interest every single month. Not too accessible, so not something that you can instantly go and spend, but just there in case. Because I know as a young person, rapidly unexpected costs will start to appear. First of all, it often arises in the form of driving lessons, all of that, insurance. That's the biggest time that young people suddenly realize the financial burden of life. But then there are other things that you have to remember, like you might have a random school trip that you've got to pay for. You might have a random unexpected collision with a car. There are all sorts of things that will happen in your life where you'll have unexpected costs. And most young people have to rely on the bank of mum and dad or get into debt when these unexpected costs come. So if you can build an emergency fund and just have maybe £1,000 if possible, or if you can even more, sat in an account building interest that's not too accessible, that is a great habit to have. I think it's really important, because then if something does come up, you know you've got the money. And then the final one is build out a side income. I really would recommend most young people today need to be more self-sufficient than they are. They need to, from an earlier age, particularly if they're starting in uni or if they're in college, build a side income. This could be getting a job. It could be starting a side hustle. That's something I teach a lot. Do something that starts making you a bit of money, because it's important to get into that habit of being able to provide for yourself, because I think young people rapidly need to realize in life they can't always rely on the bank of mum and dad, and the world is expensive. They need to make some money somehow. So those would be my 3 financial habits.
Yeah, I completely agree with your last one as well, that although it's more difficult now than it was when I was younger. I mean, at the age of 11, I had a paper round and I worked at a pub pot washing, and I also worked at a chicken farm. That's a story for another day. But it helped me out to kind of understand about earning money and putting it aside. And so maybe if we're, obviously our audience predominantly would be in education now, is from year 7 onwards, there should be a saving money initiative maybe that schools should put in. I know that there are some great initiatives going on out there around money management, and they even get parents in to start talking about it early so that they can help to encourage their children. But we're up against it, aren't we? Because we have social media, and where social media often promotes a culture of spending, how do you encourage young people to prioritize saving and investing instead?
Yeah, it's tricky. There's so much materialism on social media. Literally, these algorithms, they stalk you. They want to know everything about you, and then they'll recommend products to you. So it can be really difficult, because there's always this natural instinct as a young person to want to go and spend the money you have. The first thing, I'll come back to what the first habit I gave you earlier. But if you make everything in your life automated, then for me, it's really simple. If you want to go and buy something, you look at the amount that you have in your portion of your account. Maybe you have a set bank account for just spending money. That's how I had to do it during college. I had a separate bank card, and on that card, I loaded all of my spending money. So I knew if that's gone, it's gone. I don't have any more. I've got my other accounts, but that's not for spending. So for me, I think that's a great way to just know your limit. Know your limit. That's how much you can spend. Because obviously, if you earn money, it's right that you go and spend some of it and buy what you want, but you have to do it in a controlled manner. And then the second way to do it is try and think about how you can actually make your money go further as a young person. You don't have to spend a ton of money to have fun. A massive trend which has been very positive for young people was more and more young people these days are getting into thrifting, charity shopping, vintage. It's a way better way to make your money go further, but also it's better for the environment, less consumerism, less using products. So that's particularly something that should be encouraged more to young people. Go charity shopping, reuse your stuff, sell it to other people. It's a great way to make money and also make your pounds go further. And then the final way is, I think young people need to actually become educated on the power of compound interest. So a great example I like to use when I talk to young people is, would you rather have a penny that doubles every day for 30 days or $1 million today? Now, a lot of people will pick the $1 million because they're like, oh, I think that would probably be better. Some people pick the penny. But the thing is, if you pick the penny, by day 30, you'd have over 5 million. And that's crazy, because you wouldn't even have over 1 million by day 26, I think. But with the power of compound interest, slowly that penny doubles every day and every day. And towards the end of the 30 days and the 30th day, you're suddenly over 5 million. That's crazy. That's the power of compound interest. So young people need to realize, with the power of compound interest, the sooner that you start investing, the more money you'll be able to have when you're older. So I like to give this example. So if you were to invest £100 a month, and you did that and you put that money maybe into a low risk index fund, something very safe that statistically worked over time, like the S&P 500, and you got an average return of what is given 10% per year, in 10 years time, you'd have 20 grand. In 20 years time, you'd have 76 grand. In 30 years' time, you'd have 227 grand. In 40 years' time, you'd have 638 grand. In 50 years' time, you'd have over 1.7 million. But in 60 years' time, you'd have over 4.7 million. Do you see that difference? That final 10 years, in 50 years' time, you'd have 1.7 million. In 60 years, you'd have 4.7 million, which is crazy. And it shows the young people, the sooner you start investing and consistently put money away, the more money that you'll be able to generate. Being young, particularly with money, is a superpower, because the earlier you can start putting money away, the more money as an adult and later in your life you'll be able to have. Because right now, investing £100, it seems like, oh yeah, it's quite a lot of money, but actually it's worth so much more money when you're older. So if you can educate young people on the power of compound interest, instantly, when I've ever talked to anyone about it, it's like a light bulb goes off in their head and they're like, oh, right, maybe I shouldn't spend this money, because this money could actually be worth so much more in the years to come.
No, it's probably worth mentioning at this point that maths has never been my strong point. So a lot of that I'm probably going to have to kind of write down and sort out the maths on it. But I want you to imagine now that you're a teacher or you're any other member of staff within a secondary school, let's say that, and you are tasked with the job of designing a PSHE program on financial management. And let's look at year 7.
Yeah.
They've got to start their financial journey. Where would you start with that course? What would you start by teaching?
Ooh. For a year 7 to start their financial journey. Okay, cool. I would probably start off by giving them some coins or something, and let's say this is how much you're going to earn this month, and then I get them to write out different categories and different sheets of paper and try and allocate it. And then you go around and without giving them any advice, you see where they would allocate it and stuff. And then you want to start teaching maybe year 7s about salaries and how much realistically you'd be able to afford for different salaries. So I think teaching year 7s in a very simple way how to budget that money and actually seeing, okay, I'd allocate this much here and this much there. I think that would be an awesome way to do it. Aside from that, I'd also quite like the idea of year 7s maybe having a challenge where they start with a £5 note and they have to try and see how much money they can turn that into for charity. We did something like that and it worked really well. And it got young people really thinking about, okay, how can I turn this money into more money instead of just spending money, which I think is an awesome way to do it. So I'd probably do that. And I'd probably also just find some really interesting videos online that other people have created that show success stories of people that have invested their money so they can have something to aspire to. So off the top of my head, that's probably how I'd give a year 7 sort of class.
That's a really interesting approach. And I think that a lot of our listeners now, if they're not already putting that into practice, I'm sure they'll now be writing that up in their PSHE plans for the next term. Well, that's a great introduction to financial management and learning a lot more about your approach, why you're doing what you do, and what impact you're having on so many people. We really appreciate you coming onto the episode today.
Thank you so much. It's been so lovely to hop on. And yeah, I'm really grateful to be able to talk about this. It's a really important topic.
No, thank you very much. If you enjoyed this episode today, please share it with your friends and colleagues, leave a review or hit the subscribe button so you don't miss another episode of Safeguarding Redefined.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Safeguarding Redefined. Remember, every voice matters. If you have a story to share or a question to ask, please let us know. To stay updated on the latest episodes and safeguarding news, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on LinkedIn or check out cornerstonesafeguarding.co.uk.